feels sorry that he couldn't attend. He's at the CES show in Vegas right now. Tough.
What did he tell you?
And next month, we'll be welcoming Scott Crabtree, and his presentation breaks a little away from testing, but it is going to cover some really interesting stuff. Happy brains.
Next month or next schedule?
Next schedule.
Okay.
Good. 2 months. 2 months. Very good. And he's also looking for 10 volunteers who plan to attend to take a short survey for him. If anybody's interested, contact Shelly or reply to the email that went out about the event tonight. And then drawing at the end. And we're very excited to have Lanette. Lanette, take it away.
Thanks. You guys are awesome for coming out on a January evening, so thank you very much. And this is an impromptu mixture of what I've learned in the past 2 years pairing with developers and also trying to pair non-programmers with developers. And it's kind of a mishmash. There's a lot of time for questions. So this is who I am now. I am the one and only Spark quality employee as of less than a year. I am my boss, and that is expensive, and I am kind of a demanding and crappy boss so far, a very poor accountant, and not the best contract reviewer either, so very educational experience. In the past, I did 10 years of testing at Adobe, and when I left there, I was doing testing across the creative suites. I consulted at a large caffeinated beverage purveyor here in town, medical data place in Indiana. I don't know if I can really say it, so that's my really non-candid way. If you want to be on my Twitter and you can tolerate a lot of ridiculous cats, that's it. I have a blog. It's been updated not as often recently, but hopefully soon. I have some content I've been stashing. What else about the past can I say? I started out as a totally non-coding tester. And this year, 2 months ago, I wrote code accidentally for production and they kept it. Okay, so that's very confusing. And ask me questions if you don't think I'm going to get there, but there will be time at the end too, so don't feel like you have to be right on it. So I promised a decision point. Would there be cats or no cats? I have a reputation for pervasive cats, but sometimes life or requirements makes decisions for you. I can't give you this choice anymore. This will be a presentation of moderate cats. There will be some cats, but there will be various other things. It is not going to be totally cats, but it's not absent of cats. And that's just because I ran out of time. Sorry about that. Also, a disclaimer. This is my experience, and it's my opinion. And I do not claim any scientific data. And if someone does claim it, I recommend you ask to see who reviewed it, what the source is, and if they get offended, they probably really suck. That's the first thing you should learn about consulting, is if they promise you that they have all the facts about expenses and total cost of ownership, lifetime over software projects. And you ask them, great, can I see your data, who reviewed it, where's the background? And they say, what's your problem, you don't like data? That's your first sign to run away. So this cannot replace critical thinking. I'm sure you all have it, and I'm not claiming this is right, I just hope it's helpful to you. So you may leave with an idea of how to start pairing in a new way, whether you're pairing or not. I'm not talking about strictly one definition of pairing. You're going to get at least one real example that worked in practice, possibly 3 if I talk fast enough. How to identify when you've gone too far, you're off the edge, and that's where I am today. I'm excited to talk about it. I have officially gone off the deep end of pairing. What to do with the lone cowboy coder who wants no tanto. What do you do if you are the lone cowboy coder who wants no tanto? And then a few odd ways you can challenge the boundaries of roles right now. So these are the most common excuses I like to hear. Why should we pair? Shouldn't all testers code? All we do is we just load up our Visual Studio, and then all the testers read the code and they automatically understand it, and they write their own test code, and there's unit tests, and then they all work together, and it's all in the code, and no customers, and people who don't code suck, so let's not include them. They can all come see the demo at the end, and if they don't like it, screw them. They should have better requirements. Isn't that like the top thing we do? Okay. And then the other one is, well, it won't work here because we aren't agile, we don't code, we still use waterfall, we use ATPT, so we don't need it, we're not in the same time zone, we can't possibly do it, we have gorillas and crocodiles. There's so many, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I've heard so many reasons why it can't be done. But the only excuse that I think is a possible explanation, and not just an excuse, is there are obstacles. So there are some real obstacles. The top obstacle would be pairing, silos, and non-supportive management who cannot let go. So there are obstacles. Plus pairings can be scary. This is me and my friend Belle. We are Day of the Dead, we're a dead pair, so you don't want to be the scariest pair. You want to be the best pair. So why I started pairing was this diagnosis I call testing limbo. They have pushed testing as low as it can go. When your head is to the floor and you cannot possibly test because you have not a freaking resource in you, there's no way you can keep up. Like right now, I have a client, I'm their first official tester. It's really awesome. I have another half-time person. We have 6 projects and 36 developers. So it's a little busy. And it's been really interesting. I think a lot of companies are in this place right now where some interesting decisions have been made. There are a lot of things I don't understand about business that I'm new to learning. There are a lot of financial issues that I don't fully comprehend. But I do comprehend what happens on a testing team when you have one person and several projects, and you don't have very much time to do your testing. You're going to have to figure out some things that work. So that's how I started doing pairing. Pairing is no longer just for men with beards on IMAX, but they are included. They may absolutely pair at any time. Not just for one token woman writing Ruby. She's invited too. Hipsters with PBR shots for breakfast in Silicon Valley, they may pair, but they're not the only ones. And then this term that we only want to pair with serious computer scientists. I'm a crappy regular scientist. I'm not even that good of a cook, but I still write code. And I don't think everyone who writes production code is a serious computer scientist, or like you must be this tall. We have all kinds of people, and their impression of their own coding ability versus reality really varies a lot. So it used to just look like this: extreme programming shops, 2 guys, that was all pairing. It is not a metaphor. So pairing means you and another person in some way, and not just your baby. And it's also not just for junior developers, and it's not just so testers can bask in your glorious knowledge and pick up all the coderness that they should have. So I think pairing matters only when accuracy is important and communication matters, and also only when it can do that in the same or less time. So it takes some experimentation to know if it's going to work. It's not automatically going to work. I think it often works. So if you earn money for productivity as a team based on value delivered, it is worth trying though. And I have some specifics for trying it, yes.
Quick question about the last
Yeah.
slide. When you talk about productivity, accomplish better work in the same or less time, are you talking about short-term time or the long-term time?
exactly.
You talking about time for 2 people or time for 1 people? I said 1 people.
I'm talking about if you track when your features are handed off for a certain time, at an acceptable quality to the end user.
So you're talking longer term time, not like, if I sit down for 4 hours, I can get this done. If we sit down for 4 hours, we're not gonna finish it. But
I'm
then we'll
talking
get
about
faster
delivering the
later.
product to the client where you get money for it and you move on to something
All
else. That is the only measure of time anyone should give a rat's patootie about.
Hey, one thing
And the
about-
rest is pretend.
When you're thinking about your capabilities going forward, so if you can actually develop more eloquent code or something because you're basically doing more, you're eliminating technical debt because you're working together, that helps you on a longer term, so you don't get into, over your head longer term, but it may take you longer the first time.
Yeah, that'd be really great. I mean, the one team where we made something from scratch, it was so cool. But the rest of the time, we've inherited this absolute hellacious situation where we've had to refactor half of it or more, and it's really been, like one step forward, 2 steps back the whole time. So it really depends what you start with and what the project is. For the new project, the 1 out of 6 that I worked on, that was a lovely advantage, that we wrote more complete code. It included more errors before it ever was handed off, and that makes your bug count look beautiful to people who care about that. I don't, but not people I talk to usually, but some people do. Okay, so anyways, there are some people who pairing is gonna upset more than you can gain from it, and that is okay. It just takes some experimentation to find out. There are some pairs that are just a horrible combination, and that's also okay. And there are some people who do not pick up on body language, visual cues, people who chew loud, what else? Let's just say there are some human issues that happen. And for that reason, it's important to take what works and let it go. So not every human wants to pair. So first I want to talk about what is a software developer to me. And I don't consider myself one. I consider myself a novice coder as a side hobby and a lifetime absolutely dedicated tester who will code to support my testing if I must. But I am not a developer. So is it anyone who codes? Is it just production code? That's another thing I've heard. These are our testers. They write our unit tests. They write our acceptance tests. These are our coders. What about TDD? Does that mean everyone's a tester and a developer? Does it matter if the tests are part of the production code? Does that then make you a real developer? And then what about the code that we didn't write, that we still have to put in there? Who's responsible for that? And then there's integrated components, and then there's other teams we have to interact with, especially those lovely databases in the medical industry I got to learn some about. They are not just guys who look like this or with beards, nor are they Barbies with pink potted plants. That's the software engineer Barbie, kind of neat. This guy, Michael Bolton, he's a software testing colleague, and he's awesomely smart, and I've known him for many years, but he says all testers are also developers, and all POs are also developers. I'm not as fancy with my language as he is. I'm kind of like blue collar, so I don't think of it that way. Are you a tester or a developer? I think it just depends on what you're doing and who you're communicating with. It doesn't really matter as long as you know which part you're playing at the time. So this is the first person I paired with ever. This is Marty, and that's his son Cameron. And he's the first person I ever worked on a new project with. And he was a developer in test with very little testing experience and very much developer experience. Very much like a lot of new testers are today. You may have a computer science degree, but you can't probably test very much that's not code, in code. That's his website. For many years, he made testing tools and Flex applications at Adobe, and he started the whole Flex user group. When we paired before, he was the developer. That was his job. He was making an interface. We made system that tested all of the media for all the Adobe Creative Suites and validated all the parts of it for every language. And that process took 3 months before, and we got it down to 2 weeks with no errors the first time we tried. And we worked super hard together, and I'm very proud of that result. But now I work with Marty, and we don't work in the same office. So how can I pair with him now? We had great results before. I know him. He's the best person I've ever paired with. He's just great. So when he, I make an effort to eat a meal with him or anyone that I pair with whenever possible, even if you have to travel to do it. It's really hard to pair remote if you don't know the person at all, because you have to kind of, for a person like me, it helps to imagine their body language, their voice, what their face looks like, so I can understand them better. It does help. But I have one developer I pair with I've never met in person, and things are still getting better. It's just very slow. So we use Skype almost always, and we have Skype appointments, and we share our screen, and we'll be in a Skype chat for an assigned amount of time. And when I find a bug in his branch of code, he knows I'm his top priority for that block of time. And I'll say, hey, I have something to show you, and then I'll share my screen, I'll show him the bug, and he'll go fix it. And we turn around so many bugs this way, across locations, and I always let the developer pick the time within a range, because they know when they need to focus super hard on one thing, and I know I do so many projects, I can't always do their project all day. I have meetings of a bunch of projects. It can be, I have intensive tasks to do too. I mean, I have code to write too. So it really helps that it's not all day in this case. So a bonus question for anyone who may know, I don't think anybody here knows. How long was it before I referred Marty to the CEO at my client company that I work for now? Marty, who I paired with before. Can anybody guess how long?
A month. 42.
2 weeks.
Day one.
Okay, 2 months before he was laid off. When he still had a job, I said, should Adobe be ridiculous enough to ever lay him off, you better be the first person to call him, because he will get things done. He will not be blocked. And it's not just his coding skills, it's the whole being able to talk to people, being able to unblock yourself. And that's what's important. So he had, I don't believe, any laid off days. So if somebody, I think that's one advantage of pairing, is that you get to know people, and we're not meant to be isolated all day. I don't think we're meant to have our butt melded to one other person our entire career either, so that's kind of freaks me out, how some of the real extreme pairs are, but I don't know if I could do that. So to me, a tester is the person who is trying to become informed about the current state of the product. So you might be a coder, but if you're currently in your own code trying to find out what is the current reality of my code by running tests, you're a tester at that moment. Maybe not for your career. And every single developer does some kind of testing. Even if it's just compiling, that's a test. It has to compile. So testers make code, but never cats. That's my cat, Stardust. Anytime I'm at work or on Twitter, she's usually on my lap, and I think she may be starting to understand some of the basic terminology. She's been there so much. So this was the tester for beginning, this one. When I started, I had no Agile project experience, and now I have 5 projects at 3 different companies in 2 years. I had no experience testing Flex apps. Now I have 7 different Flex apps that I've tested with Marty. Before, I used to make batch files in the DOS days because I was on the BBS like a really long time ago when we didn't have Windows yet. And I had no coding experience, but now I did use Python, and I actually automated some stuff with it because we had this great developer and a really good library with someone who cared about it, and they answered my questions. and I would get stuck, and they didn't think my questions were dumb, even though I was really embarrassed. And that's how Marty and I started pairing the most, was I would ask him questions about this Python library, and he knew the system. And sometimes it just works that way. And now I'm the proud production coder of one small JavaScript. It took me 3 days and a lot of coffee, and it now exists in a customer system. So testers or developers, I think we all have to do more of both, because roles aren't as stagnant as they used to be, and I don't think that means testing is dead or any of the drama stuff that goes around, just that our roles are changing and shifting like they have been throughout all of technology, and it's a time to explore more of what we're good at and broaden what our skills are. And that's really an opportunity and not so much of a threat, because I see more testing needs to happen, not less. So I want to talk a little bit about non-programmers, because when I was in Indiana, one of our biggest problems we had were requirement gaps. They would write a requirement, and we would write all these tests to it, and we were planning to go code to these requirements, and we would test it, and we think it was perfect. We had fitness tests running against the database, and they were all green, and it's just looking great. And they would get pissed in the demos. Why does it look like this? This isn't what we asked for. Well, it meets all these requirements. What are you talking about? You know, ask for some new story if you don't like it. You're the one who wrote the requirements, you know, it seems like there's a punt point in Agile, like they just punt, they're like, the requirements aren't good. Oh well, not our problem. Totally our problem, because we're still not delivering value if it doesn't meet not just the requirements they put down, but the requirements that the customers want, the requirements that the business needs, and the requirements that we may need to intuit more than they can just give us. We cannot expect perfect requirements on a silver platter. It's not happening. We have some responsibility for teasing out the specifics we need, for questioning these requirements, and as testers, we're responsible for validating these requirements earlier. We should not surprise anyone at first demo that it's totally different than what they thought they were asking for. A non-programmer might be a person who can code, but isn't doing that on the project. So we have some people that are product owners that can code, and some of them can test, and they're still product owners. That's what they like. Sometimes when I pair up, I'm the tester. I can code in some languages. I can't code in .NET, and I'm not as good as they are in some things. My vocabulary only has a certain scope, and if you go beyond that, I'm gonna start giving you confused looks. And that's okay, it just takes some practice to get used to. So, why pair with these non-programmers? That's the first thing, like, why would you want to do it? Because shouldn't we all just raise our standard? Shouldn't everyone in the industry just have a computer science degree? I mean, every job rec I see asks for one. They want you to code on a whiteboard. They don't give a crap if you can test or if you're any good. It's ridiculous. I mean, a clown with a CS degree is better than a very experienced person with proven productivity. But this isn't true value. These are the ads that run week after week after week after week, and they keep rotating the same clowns through and wondering why it isn't working. Well, that's not really happening as much anymore. The companies have either given up and they're just having their developers learn to test better, or they're having a smaller team of testers do different things. And some of those different things are pairing and coming up with tests earlier. So I really think the whole bonanza of we're all gonna code the same language all the time, and we're all gonna have the same skills, and we're all gonna rotate around the team and do every role, I think that's over. That's a total fail. And I hope it's dead. I'm sure it's gonna reverberate around the slower companies for a while, but it doesn't work in practice very well yet. I'm sure some companies are gonna try forever. It's their holy grail. And they may get that, but I'm so glad I don't work there. I'll pay a lot of money to not work there. Okay, so the start of pairing between Marty and I was, the first thing I asked him was, hey, can I check out your dashboard? I saw the specs for it. I want to start making a few tests just to see what kind of, should I use test complete? Do we have something? How can I acceptance test this and not look at it? I had to figure something out. We had, I think 133 different types of builds we had to get through in languages. And that all of them running at the same time, and I didn't know how many people were gonna be viewing it, so I had to start planning. And he said, no thanks, I'm gonna hold off, it's just not ready. And so I asked, well, can you just show me on your system what you're working on so I can write you some test cases, you can let me know. And he got excited, he started to walk me through it, and this became our habit. So I did not sit by him. I did not pair program with him. He would get to a handoff spot where there was something I could come up with tests for. Maybe it wasn't test ready, but we went from me looking at the UI to doing walkthroughs of his code and me asking him questions about the code in less than a month. But that's Marty. He's not everybody. Not every developer is a patient person. Not everyone can explain to somebody who asks them 80 questions in a few minutes calmly. And he's very good at that. He's a very calm person, and I'm really hyper, so it was a great blend of energies. And I didn't sit in his office all day chatting at him. It was for a limited period of time. Introverts cannot interact well all day, every day with somebody who talks as fast as me. I know this. And I know if he looks like he's not doing well, I'll be like, I'll come back tomorrow. So we also learned some times of days. For him, the morning was not the best. And the afternoon, we had 2 times a day that worked well for us. So also biorhythms matter. So I want to talk about the lone wolves, the people who don't like or want to pair because, one, they think it's illogical. How can 2 people at one computer equal more work? The limitation is not your typing speed or how fast you compile. It's really the thought process. And that's why 2 minds can equal more output than 1. But that does depend. Some people may think faster than they can type. They may really be that good at their profession. And I'm not one to judge, I'm just not there. So for me, it is faster to pair, but I think it takes some time to know what a good pair is, how it works. This was the exact question I got asked last week, so I want to be really specific about this. I recommended to one team that we build branches for our continuous integration system for major features, and they tell me what time they're available to pair that day, give me a couple choices, and I'll meet them on Skype so we can turn around these changes and get them accepted quicker. We're on a tight deadline, we need to earn some points, we have a client who's waiting, and so the one person who doesn't like pairing said, what is this pairing going to do that Pivotal Tracker and Hudson aren't doing for us already? And I said, oh, have you ever tried it? Knowing that the answer was an unequivocal no. And I said, well, it might not be, but how about if you try it just 3 times, and if you don't like it, I'll never ask you again. And he agreed to that, so we haven't tried that yet, and we'll see. He may not be one for pairing, or he may be one for pairing, and I'm his only option, and that could be terrible. I hope not, because we've had great talks. So I'll have to let you know how it goes in the future. It can seem like typing out 10 bugs that need to be fixed in an email or in a Pivotal Tracker task is better than turning them around at one time. But the problem is you can't do fix test, fix test, fix test all in a row and hand that feature off that day. you're thinking about each of these tasks separately and they're not getting tested until the next time I come back to that project. We could have something done today. That's the difference. But he doesn't know because he hasn't tried it. So the other thing is, have you tried this with 3 different other people? Not every tester and not every programmer is the same. There are some testers who just love writing code. They're superly know all the vocabulary. They may know multiple languages. There's some testers that are very devious about boundary cases and they're oriented with performance and load testing. And then there's people like me who care a ton about the end-to-end workflow and the user experience. That's my top area. I care so much about that. The first question I want to know is, what can I do to make it faster to where I can test the whole end-to-end thing? Until I can do that, I don't know how far we are. That's like all I'm thinking about from day one on the project. How fast can we get these pieces in place? I'm going to test them together, and then we're going to make them better from there. I just want that skeleton there. And so it really helps if you have all those types. And then someone really good at unit testing. That's my dream team. I have some people like earmarked that they don't know about that I'd like to steal if there's money, but we'll have to see. Right now I'm a company of 1, and I'm not even a good accountant, so. Okay, the most important thing is to accept the results. If pairing is mandated, it can never be healthy. You cannot mandate people to cooperate. And people who make mandates are the #1 enemy to pairing. People who make smart goals, that is bad. Especially if those goals link up to things you don't care about, really bad. One of my favorite things about being independent is I don't do any of that anymore. It's worth so much money to me to not do that. It's so painful when what you're evaluated on is not the value you provide to the company, not the actual project you work on. It seems so strange to me that these extra influence and bizarre, like who came up with this? It's so weird.
Jim Collins.
Oh, Jim. I don't know Jim, luckily. I don't think we get along so well.
I don't think so.
Okay. So, avoid pitfalls. I would say one of the first pitfalls that I fell into was figuring that because I didn't understand all the code, I couldn't understand any of it. So you have to look at enough, you have to allow yourself to skim the code, understand what you understand now, and accept that it may not be everything if you're learning how to code. Especially if it's in a different language, you don't understand all the punctuation. And another thing is avoid asking a question about every single thing you don't understand because that might be everything in the world. And it can be really hard to do that. The first time we went through the code, I thought, wow. I got so discouraged. I thought, I'm never going to get there. I don't want to do this anymore. If this is what testing is, count me out. I do other stuff well. I'm awesome with vintage jewelry. I mean, I can sell stuff. I do other stuff. I don't have to do this. I like it. So, you know, I thought about that for a while. Wow, if my only value is my coding skill and I'm not that good at it, I don't even like it. Here's this guy who loves it. How could I compete with him? You know, it's just, I felt so discouraged. But he really helped. Because there were some things he would say, don't worry about that right now. And he would send me an email with a tutorial on something like how to understand classes. And then I would go do my research, and the next day I would understand more. And that really helped. And sometimes he would say, well, that's just punctuation. Don't concern yourself with that. It's important, but it's not, we're not there yet. So, one of the things that he did that was extremely effective was showing me in his coding environment, he would just run the code and let me drive from that environment. So all the debug code was in place. I can still test in the user environment, find performance issues. I still have my own environment set up, but I also can replicate maybe some issues that I've been seeing on his system. And I can ask questions. Along the demo, he would show me things like, well, here's where it shows certain time of how long it's taking to run this build, when it started. And I'd say, well, what if the time's not there? What happens then? Well, it turned out it defaulted in 1969, so he fixed it. And we had a better default. The default was missing. So we showed some errors. And that really helped. And then the best thing that happened at first when I didn't understand his code very well was he reviewed his own code in a different mood at a different time of day. He found more of his own errors than I found for him in the first few weeks. So if the only thing you get out of it is you're your own code reviewer, you can find your own mistakes. That's an awesome advantage. How often do we not proofread our own stuff and find mistakes we missed? Sometimes I proofread his stuff later on and I'd find variables that didn't have the same name, or sometimes I'd be like, what is that name? That doesn't make any sense to me, and we'd even change it. So, hurricane season. There's some times when pairing needs to be shut down. I'm learning this now. I am a total bottleneck. I had 14 branch builds to test yesterday, and then today when I was trying to leave and do my slides, well, yesterday they gave me 5 minutes notice before I gave a demo to the client, and then today at the doctor my blood pressure was high because it was their most scary client. But I thought it was really an honor. They thought I knew the code the best, and I gave them a pretty good demo in 5 minutes. But now I look like I have bad blood pressure. I was so stressed out. So today I said, you guys just need to test your own branch and merge it now. I'm overwhelmed. I'm never going to catch up. I've got something else to do today. Please, Lord have mercy, do this for me. I'm declaring testing bankruptcy. And sometimes you can't pair. Hurricane season will happen for developers. If you've been up for 4 days, do not engage a tester to pair with. You might scream at them. I have literally been screamed at, and I don't like it. So I think each person deserves the right to hold their own boundaries when they can and cannot pair. And that should be respected. There should not be forced pairing time. If you're feeling ill and you need time to yourself, that's just a regular human factor. If pairing is unpleasant, it's not going to be productive anyways. So, a couple of little things. What testers can do to pair better with developers. First would be to learn pseudocode. So just go online and take your computer programming basics class. And you will learn how to make some pseudocode in your head. And it can be kind of fun. You can start testing earlier. And what I mean by that is before the code's ready and you just see the requirements, start thinking of your tests and writing them down before you even have that meeting. That's going to help you pair with your developer. It's going to help you get better requirements out of your product owner. You can question the requirements as soon as you see them. So, what do you mean by adding pages? How many pages? What's the limit? What happens, can you add pages to anything? There's, all kinds of questions you can ask for each requirement. What does it look like? Where would you do that from? Is there one path? Are there multiple paths? How long does it take? Can you duplicate one to add one? All kinds of things you can ask. Wow, I didn't write that out very well. When I say find out who is worth pairing with now, go talk to your developers, find out who is unhostile, will go to lunch with you and is open to the idea. And that makes them worth pairing with because they're willing to consider that the idea may work. And then it's part of just who wants to pair and who thinks it might be productive. And I always like to let them take the lead because I think unless I'm doing a coding test or a really long end-to-end test, it's not as harmful to me to get interrupted as it is some of my developers. If they're writing, a crazy algorithm or some serious math, I don't do a lot of math and I'm happy about that. I'm not great at math. So I found it works better that way for me. That may not always be the case. It depends what kind of code and what kind of project. And I think it may be different. in other contexts. But in all 3 places I've tried this at, it works better when the programmer decides when the right time is, because they know their code best. The other thing would be getting some common vocabulary about math. And if a developer says something you don't know, I had a little notepad and I just write down some of the words and look them up. And one of the funniest things, I had a video on my blog, was trying to figure out how tall our gutters were. My boyfriend used some calculus and a laser pointer, and my method was tying a rock to a piece of yarn, like throwing it into the gutter. And so I learned some vocabulary that way. Sometimes it's...
Did you get the rock back out?
No, he was afraid I was going to break the window, so, but I got a ladder. I proved that we were close enough to get the right height of ladder. So it was, we got close enough, so it worked out. And you know what? I ended up convincing him we needed a professional gutter cleaner, so ultimately, the pairing was a success. We got no one fell off the roof. I mean, nerds on a 2-story roof, I don't know.
So you need a professional gutter cleaner because there was a rock in the gutter? How big was the rock?
Let's just say neither one of us are the most coordinated. And then I found out he bought a ladder, but the weight limit is so he can't get on it. So he has to hold it, not to climb the ladder. I'm like, he did this on purpose. We put up the Christmas lights and he's like, oh, it's unsafe. You're gonna have to climb up there. The wind's just going crazy. Yeah, that happened when I took him down. It's so cold this year. Oh. Okay, so developers can do a few things. They can practice explaining their own code in pseudocode, and not just some random code, because when you get enmeshed in your own code, you don't understand what's obvious to you isn't obvious to someone else. They may not know why you did it that way. They may not know what you tried before. Now this one can be really hard. Practice explaining to someone who doesn't know the vocabulary. I am not recommending your grandmother or your mom for this. Somebody who knows how programs work, somebody who has some affinity for computing, some experience in your domain. Try explaining to them. Teach a tester some vocabulary and walk them through your code sometime. You have something small, something simple, and they're interested, ask them for some feedback. Just give it a go. Maybe you'll find someone you want to pair with. I think this is probably the most controversial one. Show your tester your code even if they don't get it right now. I had a 1-hour class in Indiana teaching non-programming testers coding basics. I think it was the fastest talking I've ever done in 1 hour. And everyone loved the first half of it. And the last 15 minutes, I think half the people wanted to kill me. Because I went from the vocabulary and the pseudocode into talking about object-oriented basics. And they were all like, screw you, Lanette, you're terrible. Worst teacher ever. And so, phases, right? Like talking about the vocabulary first, walking through some code, remembering that there's people with computer science degrees that are crap at explaining object-oriented basics. And they just memorize some silly definition. They don't even get it. I've gotten some very poor explanations that confuse me worse. So try not to confuse your tester beyond usefulness, right? Because it's really easy to just like too much. So I've learned the hard way. Don't start with a bunch of philosophical metaphors about automobiles and robots and or cats even. It's too much, start with something useful. And then this is my top favorite thing to ask a developer when in a code walkthrough is what was the most difficult part to write and why? So if you're a developer, you can tell your tester, I struggle the most with this part of writing the code. And I'm concerned about it because it interacts with this and that. And you should take some extra caution around these things. Because you know the best where there might be weaknesses. So clue them in and let them make your code better. So every single one of us can invite product owners to the first demo. The first time we look at it, as a tester, we can show them our outline of what we've made. Not the demo when everyone's there and the bigwig is there and they have to pretend to smile when they hate it. The first one, when you can still change it. You can invite the designer, you can even send them a screenshot if you're not there. I use Jing, J-I-N-G, it's already trying to invade the corner of the screen over here. You see, I'm so dedicated to it, it's not even shut down right now. I use it constantly. I always record my bugs if it's someone in a different area so they can see everything I did, even if they don't understand what I'm telling them in my email. I think I write fantastic. I don't know why anyone couldn't possibly understand every word, but we all have a different style and it can be hard to invoke tone across email. I think the top thing I want to say is ask those questions sooner. As soon as the requirements come out, it's a great time for the tester and developer to meet together and come up with questions before you even flesh out the requirements further, because you understand what it's going to take to implement this. They don't know what they're asking for sometimes. They know what they want to see, but they may not know what it takes to make that happen. And then above all else, remember the user, and if you're asked for something that you think is absolutely going to suck for the user, mention why that is, and come up with a few examples if you can. I try and find an example that exists in the wild and show why it is bad and we should do better. That can help. So this is what made pairing, this is why I got into pairing, the whole thing. I had a willing teacher who values testing skills. He didn't think it was worthless to teach me more about coding, and he didn't think my testing skills were silly. He actually had respect for them, and he wanted to learn more about testing, so we exchanged knowledge. A tester who understands the basic of some basic programming. So it helped that when we first started, I was willing to go on my own at night, take some programming basics and vocabulary courses online. So this was not just him doing nothing. For everything he did for me, I would go teach myself something. No one is going to do all the work of teaching you how to code for you, but they can help you when you get stuck. And that's the cool thing. I mean, I think if I just relied on him, he would have been exhausted and he would have quit. He was a new dad, and he still did this for me. So, I think as soon as a tester is to the level that they can write pseudocode, they're ready to get walkthroughs of code and start getting used to seeing it, picking up more. But you have to be to that level of understanding the vocabulary where you can read some basic pseudocode and kind of get where it's going. Then you're ready to see the real thing. If you just drop someone in with no understanding right into the code, it's going to be overwhelming. So, more coding experience from a tester I think is better and easier to pair with in some cases, but it doesn't replace an early test perspective. If you have someone who's a coder acting as your tester, make sure they're not giving you a code review. You want their test perspective, not just another set of eyes on your code. You want them asking you questions as a tester, telling you what tests they're going to run, giving you more than just a code review. That's the point of this kind of pairing. Otherwise, they can just read it remotely. I mean, there's still some benefit to fixing something live. So overall, my code got better. His code was stable sooner, and the acceptance tests were already built in by the time the code went into the build. And because of that, we had far less turnaround on basic bugs. By basic bugs, I mean we still had integration bugs, we had tool bugs, we had quite a few bugs for other teams, we had database bugs, we had Python library bugs, we had configuration of our network bugs, we had a few performance bugs, but we got this project done because we didn't have functional bugs in our bug database bogging us down all the time. And then also, unlocking and unblocking is the side effect that I got from it. I now don't wait until I have a testable build. On these projects I work on now, I have SOAP UI and I can go test our web services and complain about them before we have a UI. That really helps. I can prove that the problem is the services and not the front end if I need to. And only because I understand enough about what the code is doing was I able to learn that. And so I thank Marty 1 year ago for showing me some code, because I can test quicker now. And I'm not blocked because someone didn't provide me something in a package. Another thing, things that pass code inspections do not make sense. You'll notice that on the 9th, I got a 4th of July free shipping notice on the 9th of July. And so, you know, sometimes it may make sense in the code, but it doesn't make sense to a human. So we have to think about the user while playing the tester role. This is my favorite part of Agile, the good enough, like what is done, what is good enough. You know, if you can do it on one path, it's done. We get the points, man. Yeah. Okay, no one can use it. It has all these problems, but we have the points. So that game is kind of weird. I think when you're pairing up with your developer as a tester, you have to figure out what's good enough on that team. And I've been on a bunch of different teams. And some of the levels are not my choice. That's all I'll put in there, but you have to start from where you're at and move forward from there. So I'm hoping our pairing will get our quality moving in a direction that we all can agree on is achievable. And sometimes there's a lot of factors that are outside of the team that influence what good enough is. And I like to bring this up because I think it's the main way to get developers started, is to let them know what they get out of it. And I think really the best thing that they get out of it is it looks like they write code with fewer bugs to everyone else. It also looks like they're friendly and involved. There are things that aren't mentioned here that I think are far more important than these advantages. I think that everyone who works in computing knows that they're not meant to be isolated all day. And it's better for our brain to have variety. So if we have different phases to the day, even if you get up and walk around and come back, you think differently. I think there are some advantages to contact with different humans that expand us in ways that just sending emails to different people do not do. Especially in terms of how you feel when you leave for the end of the day. How you feel about your team. If you are on a team, or if you're just a kick-ass member and your team's dragging you down, or you know, if these people are okay, but these people, they're too different, they're not like us. It's really easy to focus on the differences if you just see email, and it's a lot easier to see what you have in common if you go talk to people. So finding a good time, starting small, I think we talked about that stuff. Do try and have some variety. Don't always be serious, different locations. We didn't always pair in our office. We'd go to the comfy chairs with beverages. We paired at a barbecue joint, which is not very good for your fancy hardware. Ribs are very sticky, but it was good. On the no-doing, don't make a mandate. Don't say all coders must test, all testers must code. Those clowns, whatever. Okay, don't say, oh, it doesn't matter if you pair, but then if you have to cut people, anyone who didn't participate is canned. That thing just sucks. Some companies who do that, oh, that's the worst. So you have to really be serious that it's a choice. You can't say it's a choice and then act differently. And then you can't put the introverts in the center of a room and stare at them and make them uncomfortable. It's not productive. So I don't like that. And then also don't track what every pair produces as a deliverable in some metric and make a pie chart. That is the worst too. I don't know why these people don't get fired more, like that do this stuff, but they don't. And then don't stay there all day. If you're pairing with your developer, no chair merging. So this is what Marty had to say the first time we paired. And my favorite thing he had to say in this whole part was perspective. That he got more ability to zoom. He's fully zoomed into his code in its isolated section, organized, and he's able to unorganize because of getting some test perspective. He's become a better developer, but he's an awesome teacher too. this is like kind of long and it's on the website and I hear that I'm taking a long time, so. Okay, so I'm gonna skip to the summary and you guys can read that online. And I have so many anecdotes and stories that would probably take you longer than my object-oriented rant that made people get the pitchforks out. So, before you can test the code, you can test the product only if you expand what a test is. So if you're testing the requirements and not the actual code, you're still testing the product. So there can be no code and you're starting testing because you're testing the idea. And there's a lot more work going on in this area than ever before, but it doesn't apply just to startups or places where there is no code. It applies to even when we're refactoring or even if we have old legacy code. Developers can make the code more testable 100%. I have seen this happen even by simple things like asking your tester what to name something. That was my favorite thing in Indiana was we sat in the same room. They go, oh, yeah, it does this and that and this. What should we call it? And we would take a quick vote. And we did team names, variable names, for what we all could understand. Like whatever got the most votes, that was the name. It was kind of fun. What else? It's good to not have all your knowledge in one area. Like there was this one really hairy, I don't even know what to call it, like 19-year-old code that was so old. Like one guy knew it. If anything broke in that, we were in trouble. If that guy ever quit or someone else bought him, I mean, I don't know what would even happen to the whole system. There's so many places that have that guy or that system and they aren't doing anything about it. We've got to be able to maintain our own code. I mean, it's just such a crazy risk. I don't know why this happens so often, but it does. So it can help with that. And then when you need to ebb and flow, one last thing I promised to say is when you know you've gone too far. You have definitely gone too far if you are the only bottleneck to progress. So if you're a tester and you're the bottleneck to progress, then you are making people wait on you when you could be teaching them to fish. You could be writing them some acceptance criteria in advance. You could be trying to figure out, okay, how can we help them automate these things themselves? How can they test it themselves? What can we do to make the system better? Because I'm one human, I can't help these 36 developers the same day. I can't do it. Or we could hire more testers. You know, it just depends on the situation, but in my case, it's gone crazy. I don't want to see every change. I don't want to see that you put in a new comment or you changed a word in an error. I mean, please send me something big or don't send it at all. I mean, it's kind of like that where I've gone too far now. I mean, I don't want to see every code change. It's painful. I just want to see what's big and risky. So I think it can take some time to adjust on each team when it's appropriate to pair, who's going to pair, when. And yeah, that's all I got. That's all the cats. I only think there were 2 cats. So if you want to contact me, that's my Gmail. 3 cats. The official cat count, 3. 5 if you count the cats on my shoes. Total of 5 cats in the room. So please shoot. If you have questions for me. Yeah. Red shirt first.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was like, no, they're
No,
behind me.
please.
I'm sorry. You know, so you consult with quality, right? To
Yes.
you basically how, and I'm curious about this because it applies to my endeavors as well.
Yeah.
I do quality, and one thing that I feel insecure about is the business needs are focused on getting the product out the door, and that's when we got to make our Quardev report. So how do you justify the value of doing a good quality measurement?
Did you notice that my title is that I'm a consulting tester?
Yeah.
I am of the team, I am for the team, I am with the team. I do not consult to management. I am for making teams deliver value. I do not understand management metrics. I don't know enough about statistics to validate most of the metrics they use, and frankly, I don't believe they're very valuable. And I love being independent because I no longer work with people I don't respect. And that's been wonderful. I can recommend it highly even if it comes at great risk.
Do you ever have to sell yourself and follow up?
It's only been 8 months,
In terms of the value.
so I have not yet had to, how can I say it? I ended up being independent because two jobs found me, and I have not found a job. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess
I do not
cool.
advertise.
Renew.
Right?
Cool.
So
Good for you. That's great.
I went to several interviews to get a regular job, and I got so depressed, I just couldn't do it. Especially when the guy told me that his job was like fighting a gorilla with a toothpick. I'm like, oh, dude, I had your job. Oh. I just really, wow. You know what though? I've totally done that job, and like fighting an unwinnable war against people with more power and less foresight makes me feel very bad. And now I'm happy because even in the companies that I don't necessarily feel like we're where we should be, yeah, the quality is great, 1 tester, 36 developers, but at least it's moving forward, and so I feel positive about that. There was somebody in the back that had their hand up at the very beginning, yes?
The way you talked about pairing is kind of one direction. You looking at the code, testing to help the developer, coordination going in that direction. I wondered if you thought about or even examined the possibility of reversing that, in the sense that, for example, I work with a lot of very, very, very senior developers in embedded systems that are extremely, rarefied spaces, but and they get kind of filled with themselves, you might say, and they don't really like to talk about how exquisite they are and all that stuff. I mean, the only thing you ever get out of them is, I'm so cool, I can hardly stand myself. But what I found worked well with them, which sounds a lot like what you're doing, is to go in and be, I'm really stupid. I'm trying to figure out how to test this brilliant thing you did. Maybe you could spend a few minutes explaining to me what's wrong with my approach to testing it. And it kind of makes it so you don't end up looking at this code that's truly bizarre. And I think would even 99% of the developers I know wouldn't have any idea what's going on in there. Less me, who's not even a good coder. But it still gives you a way to interact about the objectives, about what are we trying to accomplish, how does it relate to the behavior of the system, how can I do a better job of testing, and it also encourages, what I find is, they start showing off after a while, and they start explaining it to you like, well now this is really cool, now watch this, and et cetera and so on. So they start that demo thing you were talking about, even though they're really reluctant up front. I just wondered if you thought about it both ways, or if you would consider both of those approaches equal.
So I like your question a lot. I have not been in a situation where that would be possible, because all the situations I've been in, the developers have been under this kind of gun to the head, thou shalt write code, you shall write it faster, it will be good now, it will be good yesterday. I don't know, there's this whole like whip thing. Like, I haven't had developers who were looking to spend time to explain. So like I talked about with Marty, I started really small with asking him questions, but most of the time I wish that we had a more equal balance of testers who could go talk to developers and build more relationships. But the state of the software context I've been in for the last 3 years has been, the ratio has gone from more equal of testers who perform testing, serving user interests, to a smaller ratio of testers, smaller, dwindling, ever smaller, to a much larger group of code-focused developers. So that's the context in which I've been working in the last 3 environments. But I know there are other industries, and I know that in regulated industries and embedded systems, things are much different. So I haven't had that chance yet, but I hope to, because that sounds awesome. I really like the idea of a tester being able to not only find out what's happened in the past, but figure out where is that developer going in the future in their own mind with this code. What is their plan for maintaining it? What kind of tests do they want to see? What kind of tests do they want to learn to put in their own code? So they're not waiting for you. They're getting instant feedback. How can we give that to them? That's the kind of question I like to see answered. Oh, I'm sorry. Over here in the white sweater there, you had a question, did you?
No.
I'm sorry. I'm losing it now. I'm gonna have to go to the side soon.
Sorry. So I've got a question about buy-in. So you've got, a lot of times if you get a good pairing relationship started and you sort of nurture it a little bit, you get in the foot in the door and get this going, they'll see the value, whether you're subverting them into realizing, oh, they're making better code quality. In the meantime, the manager or the rest of the team may or may not get a good feel for the quality. I wonder if you have some good examples where other people got the vibe from a pairing experience that you were having, some of those win moments that carried out to say, oh, it's actually worth it, it's not just those two chatting about stuff again.
So there's a few things that have made that happen. The first time, the only thing that made that happen was no one thought we could deliver on time and we were early. So absolute shock at the result.
Okay,
And
so results speak for
I
themselves.
have to admit, I worked a lot and I was really pissed. And that helped me learn. I was so mad. Yeah, so I don't know. I learned fast when I'm feeling threatened, competitive, and angry. I don't know why. Something redheaded, I don't know. Could be. But also, the other thing that helps is developer rumor. You know, just sort of, how did you get, because you, especially on the same team, you have code that's working together, you'll be talking about something that worked before, I solved it this way, and you know, have you even thought about this test? When you have developers that start talking about tests, that's always positive. So that's the second way I've seen it happen. And the third way is the velocity goes up if it's an agile team. So those are the only things I've seen so far. Anybody on this side of the room, I've been totally ignoring you. Have a question?
Forecasts. I think it was forecasts, actually.
Forecasts?
There's forecasts.
Okay. That's a really low number for me. I gave one at Mozilla that had maximum cats, and there's some of the internet memes, they actually loved it. And I'm so happy. I mean, I also worry about presenting. There are some people that are so formal. They complained about one of my colleagues wearing jeans. And if I go in and they're in a suit, I just walk out. I mean, really? I know it's silly and I should give more of a chance, but to not listen to someone's talk because they're wearing jeans is just crazy. Most people who talk, they pay to do it. They don't realize, I mean, people do this because they love it. It takes time. They care. I mean, I'm not gonna, I have clients that would pay me money to do work. I came out here because I care about pairing. I want to do more of it. And I don't want to see testing just become coding people who don't have any testing skills. I don't think that's the future that's good for testing. So I come present. So sometimes with many cats, sometimes 4.
I just felt bad I said 3.
That was low, but it was a pretty good estimate. Percentage-wise, close.
So in celebration of
Yes.
the cats, we have a little drawing. As such, Lanette, I think we'd like you to pick out
Yay.
the winner.
I'm not in there, so. Okay. Okay.
All right. And Paul Cook. Paul.
It has an apple.
If you don't want it, I'll take it.